The twin suns of Ventura cast a golden glow over the rocky expanse that Harold called home. The air was crisp and carried the faint metallic tang of minerals from the planet's rich crust. For most, Ventura was a desolate, forgotten corner of the galaxy, but for Harold, it was paradise. He traded the chaos of his galactic ranger days for peace, quiet, and the occasional challenge of taming the planet's stubborn terrain. On this particular morning, Harold had ventured farther than usual, his well-worn boots crunching on gravel as he explored a series of craggy ridges on the edge of his property. He carried his trusty plasma staff, a relic from his past life, more for nostalgia than necessity. Ventura's wildlife rarely posed a threat. But something felt off. As Harold rounded a jagged outcrop, a faint, rhythmic hum reached his ears. It was mechanical, unnatural. Intrigued, he followed the sound until he found himself peering into a shallow ravine. There, nestled among the rocks, was a glowing, iridescent sphere, pulsating egg. The egg wasn't alone. Surrounding it was a lattice of metallic cables, shimmering faintly with an electrical charge. A poacher's trap. Harold recognized the design immediately. It was crude but effective, emitting a field to incapacitate whatever it ensnared. He knelt down, muttering under his breath. Whoever set this wasn't expecting visitors. With practiced precision, Harold deactivated the trap using a multi-tool from his belt. The cables retracted, and the hum ceased. As he carefully lifted the egg, it emitted a soft, melodic chime, like a heartbeat, and a warm light radiated from its core. Harold's rugged face softened as he cradled the delicate object. "You're not from around here, are you?" he murmured, feeling an odd sense of connection to the mysterious creature inside. Carrying the egg back to his modest home, Harold tried to make sense of what he'd found. His cabin was a blend of rustic charm and advanced technology, with solar arrays and hydroponic gardens that kept him self-sufficient. He placed the egg in a makeshift incubator, a repurposed stasis chamber he'd salvaged years ago. Hours turned into days, and Harold found himself growing attached to the strange artifact. He spent time studying its unique properties, using his old ranger tools to scan its structure. The egg's composition was unlike anything he'd encountered, organic yet crystalline, with an energy signature that defied categorization. One evening, as the suns dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the land, Harold was startled by a cracking sound. He rushed to the incubator just in time to see the egg splitting open. A surge of brilliant light filled the room, and Harold shielded his eyes. When the glow subsided, he lowered his arm and stared, wide-eyed, at the creature now curled in the egg's remnants. It was no larger than a house cat, but its presence was awe-inspiring. Its body was covered in scales that shimmered with the colors of the cosmos, shifting from deep purples to radiant golds. Its wings were delicate, translucent membranes etched with veins of light. Two wide, curious eyes, like molten silver, blinked up at Harold. It let out a soft chirp sound that resonated deep in Harold's chest, as if the creature were speaking to his very soul. "Well, aren't you a sight?" Harold whispered, his voice tinged with wonder. The dragon wobbled on its spindly legs, taking a hesitant step forward before collapsing into Harold's lap. He chuckled, gently stroking its smooth scales. "Looks like I've got myself a houseguest." As the night wore on, Harold couldn't shake the feeling that this little creature was more than just a chance discovery. The universe, it seemed, had plans for him yet. The quiet routine of Harold's life on Ventura had been thoroughly upended. The baby alien dragon, now named Spark, was a handful. Its playful nature often left Harold scrambling to repair broken equipment or chasing it across the rocky terrain. But as the days passed, Harold grew deeply attached to the little creature, even as he wondered about its origins and what might come next. The answer arrived sooner than he expected. One afternoon, as Harold worked on fortifying the energy field around his cabin, an unfamiliar hum filled the air. He looked up just in time to see a sleek, black ship descending from the sky, its hull reflecting the sunlight like obsidian. His gut tightened. Visitors were rare on Ventura, and unannounced visitors were never good news. The ship landed, kicking up dust and debris, and the ramp lowered with a hiss. Out stepped a woman in a crisp, emerald green uniform, her tall boots crunching on the gravel. She carried herself with purpose, her piercing eyes scanning the landscape until they landed on Harold. "Harold Gage," she called out, her voice carrying an authoritative edge. "That depends," Harold replied, gripping his plasma staff as spark peeked out from behind his legs. "Who's asking?" The woman raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm Zara Talek, Galactic Conservation Corps. I'm here because of that." She nodded toward Spark, who chirped curiously. Harold's eyes narrowed. "And how exactly do you know about Spark?" Zara sighed. The energy signature of its egg was picked up by several monitoring stations. Word spread quickly, and not all of it to the right people. "You're not the only one who knows about this dragon, Harold. Others are coming, and their intentions aren't as noble as mine." Before Harold could reply, a second sound tore through the air, a deep, guttural roar that sent a shiver down his spine. From over the horizon, a cluster of smaller, angular ships appeared, their blackened hulls bristling with weaponry. Zara's expression turned grim. "Bounty hunters," she muttered. "They're here for the dragon." Harold wasted no time. "Inside. Now." The cabin's defenses activated as Harold and Zara barricaded themselves inside. Spark, sensing the tension, coiled tightly around Harold's arm, its scales glowing faintly. Zara pulled up a holographic display from her wristband, analyzing the incoming ships. "3 of them," she said. "Krell's crew. They're infamous for trafficking endangered species. If they get their hands on Spark, it'll be sold to the highest bidder, likely dissected for its abilities." "Not on my watch," Harold growled. The first ship landed with a thunderous crash, and heavily armed figures disembarked, their exosuits clanking against the rocky ground. The cabin shook as they opened fire, testing Harold's defensive grid. Sparks flew, but the shield held firm. "You've got a plan, right?" Zara asked, pulling out a compact blaster. "Always," Harold said, flipping a switch on the wall. A panel slid open, revealing a hidden tunnel. "This leads to the canyon system. It'll buy us time." The 3 of them, Harold, Zara, and Spark, slipped into the tunnel just as the shield began to fail. The sound of plasma fire echoed behind them, but Harold pushed forward, navigating the winding path with practiced ease. The tunnel opened into a vast canyon, its jagged cliffs providing cover. "We can't keep running," Zara said, catching her breath. "They'll track us." "I'm counting on it," Harold replied, a glint of determination in his eyes. He pointed to a natural choke point in the canyon. "Help me rig these walls with explosives. We'll give them a warm welcome." Using supplies from Harold's emergency stash, they set up a series of improvised charges. The bounty hunters, predictably, followed the trail and entered the canyon. As they passed the choke point, Harold triggered the detonator. The explosion was deafening, and a cascade of rocks tumbled down, burying 2 of the ships and forcing the third to retreat. For a moment, all was silent. Then Spark let out a triumphant chirp, its scales glowing brighter than ever. Harold smiled, but Zara's expression remained serious. "This is just the beginning," she said. "They'll send more. And once the galaxy learns what Spark can do, every faction, every empire, every outlaw will want it." Harold glanced at Spark, who nuzzled his hand, oblivious to the danger. "Then we don't stay here. We find somewhere safe, somewhere they can't follow." Zara nodded. "I know a sanctuary world. It's remote, heavily protected. But getting there won't be easy." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Harold said. As the 2 of them prepared to leave Ventura, Harold couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet retirement was well and truly over. The galaxy was coming for Spark, but Harold was determined to keep the little dragon safe no matter the cost. The journey to the sanctuary planet of Elisera began under the cover of darkness. Zara piloted her sleek starship, the Greenlight, through Venture's atmosphere while Harold strapped Spark into a secure harness in the co-pilot's chair. The baby dragon chirped excitedly, its shimmering scales reflecting the light from the control panel. Harold chuckled despite himself. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he asked Spark, who nipped playfully at his finger. "Let's hope that enthusiasm lasts," Zara muttered as she input coordinates. "We've got at least 3 jumps before we're out of Krell's hunting range." The first jump was uneventful, but as they prepared for the second, Zara's console blared a proximity alert. A massive frigate appeared from hyperspace, cutting off their escape. Harold recognized the markings immediately, a black serpent emblazoned across the hull. "Krell," he growled. From the frigate, smaller attack ships swarmed out, moving in coordinated patterns to encircle the Greenlight. Zara threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, weaving through the barrage of plasma fire, while Harold scrambled to the rear turret. "I'll keep them off your back," Harold yelled, gripping the controls with the steadiness of a seasoned ranger. Sparks danced across the hull as enemy fire grazed the ship, but Harold's precise aim took out 2 of the attackers. Inside the cockpit, Spark began to glow. Its scales pulsed rhythmically, and an unearthly hum filled the cabin. Zara glanced over her shoulder, alarmed. "What's it doing?" Harold's voice came through the comm. "No idea, but it doesn't look good." Suddenly, Spark spread its tiny wings, and a gravitational wave rippled outward, warping space itself. The attacking ships spiraled out of control, their pilots screaming over open channels as the gravitational distortion tore them from formation. Krell's frigate barely managed to stabilize, retreating to a safe distance. As the wave dissipated, Spark collapsed into Harold's arms, its glow dimmed but still flickering faintly. "What in the void just happened?" Zara asked, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "Spark happened," Harold said, cradling the exhausted dragon. "And I don't think we've seen the full extent of its abilities." A dangerous discovery. Once they were safely in hyperspace, Zara conducted a thorough scan of Spark. The results left her speechless. "This is unprecedented," she said, pulling up a hologram. "Spark's biology isn't just unique, it's revolutionary. Its ability to manipulate gravitational fields is tied to a crystalline organ in its chest, something I've never seen before." Harold frowned. "What does that mean for Spark?" "It means," Zara said grimly, "that Spark could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Imagine what an empire could do with a creature like this, creating wormholes for instantaneous travel, stabilizing dying stars, or even weaponizing gravity itself." Harold's grip tightened on the edge of the console. "Which is exactly why no one can get their hands on it." Zara nodded. "The sanctuary on Elisera has the resources to protect Spark, but we need to get there before word spreads further. Krell's crew isn't the only threat we're facing." Their conversation was cut short as another alert flashed on the console. This time, it wasn't a ship but a distress signal, a civilian freighter stranded in a nearby system. Zara hesitated. "We don't have time for detours," she said. Harold stared at the blinking signal, conflicted. "If it were you out there, would you want someone to ignore it?" Zara groaned. "Fine. But we make it quick." A heroic gamble. The freighter was adrift near the event horizon of a black hole, its engine sputtering as it fought against the gravitational pull. Zara maneuvered the Greenlight close, but the freighter's captain appeared on the comms, panic etched across his face. "It's no use. We're too far gone, save yourselves." Harold glanced at Spark, who had begun to stir. The dragon's scales glimmered faintly, and Harold felt an idea forming. "Zara, if we can get close enough, Spark might be able to pull them out." "You're joking," Zara said. "Spark's still recovering." "We don't have another option," Harold said firmly. "Trust me." Zara sighed and brought the ship into position. Harold carried Spark to the viewing bay, whispering gently to the little dragon. "I know you're tired, but we need your help. Just one more time, okay?" Spark chirped weakly, but its scales began to glow once more. Harold held his breath as the baby dragon extended its wings, and a gravitational wave rippled outward. The freighter jolted forward, inching away from the black hole's pull. Spark's body trembled with effort, its glow intensifying until, with one final push, the freighter broke free. The freighter captain's voice crackled through the comms. "You saved us. I don't know how to thank you." "Just pay it forward," Harold said, watching as Spark collapsed in his arms, utterly spent. The revelation spreads. As they resumed their journey to Elisera, Zara's console lit up with incoming messages. News of Spark's feat had somehow leaked, and the galaxy was buzzing with speculation. Governments, corporations, and criminal syndicates were all vying for information about the mysterious dragon capable of defying the laws of physics. "Krell's the least of our worries now," Zara said, scanning the reports. "The galaxy knows about Spark. We've got everyone from imperial warlords to mercenary clans coming after us." Harold stroked Spark's tiny head, his jaw set with determination. "Then let them come. They'll have to go through me first." Zara smiled faintly. "I think they'll find that's a lot harder than they expect." As the sanctuary world of Elisera loomed on the horizon, Harold knew that their journey was far from over. Spark had become more than a rare creature. It was a beacon of hope, power, and danger. And the galaxy was about to change forever. The sanctuary planet of Elisera appeared on the ship's viewport as a glowing emerald sphere nestled in the void of space. Covered in dense jungles and crystalline oceans, it was one of the galaxy's most secretive and well-protected reserves for endangered species. Zara guided the green light through the planet's cloaking field and docking protocols, her hand steady on the controls despite the tension in the air. "Welcome to Elisera," Zara said as the ship settled on a hidden landing pad beneath the canopy of colossal trees. "If anywhere is safe for Spark, it's here." Harold glanced down at the sleeping dragon in his arms. Spark had been unusually quiet since its daring rescue of the freighter crew. Though its scales still shimmered faintly, the little creature seemed drained from the ordeal. "Let's hope you're right," Harold murmured. As they disembarked, they were greeted by a small delegation from the Galactic Conservation Corps. At their head was Director Kael'vas, a tall, imposing figure whose silver hair and piercing green eyes gave him an air of authority. He stepped forward, extending a hand to Zara. "Zara," he said, his voice warm. "You've done well. We've been monitoring your progress. And this," he turned his gaze to Spark, "is the most remarkable discovery in a century." Harold felt a twinge of unease. Kael's words were kind, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made him wary. Still, he followed Zara and Kael into the sanctuary's main facility, a sprawling structure built seamlessly into the natural environment. A place of refuge, the facility was breathtaking. Creatures from across the galaxy roamed freely in vast enclosures designed to mimic their natural habitats. Harold spotted a herd of luminescent gliders soaring through a holographic sky and a pair of horned leviathans wading in a shimmering lagoon. Kael led them to a secure habitat that had been prepared for Spark, a dome of energy that simulated the dragon's homeworld, based on Zara's scans of its egg. Inside, bioluminescent plants and pools of liquid light created a serene environment. "This habitat is impenetrable," Kael explained. "Spark will be safe here while we study it. Its abilities could revolutionize our understanding of the universe." Harold bristled. "Study it? Spark isn't some lab experiment. It's a living creature." Kael raised an eyebrow. "And that's why we need to ensure its survival. But Spark's existence has already drawn attention from powerful forces. If we don't understand its abilities, we can't protect it or the galaxy." Harold looked at Zara, who nodded reluctantly. "Kael's right. Spark is safer here than anywhere else." Reluctantly, Harold placed Spark into the habitat. The little dragon stirred, chirping softly as it explored its new surroundings. Harold couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving Spark in a gilded cage. The infiltration. That night, alarms blared across the sanctuary. Harold, already on edge, sprang from his quarters and grabbed his plasma staff. Zara was waiting in the hallway, her blaster drawn. "Krell's forces," she said grimly. "They've breached the perimeter." Harold's heart sank. The bounty hunters had tracked them, and now the sanctuary, the one place that was supposed to be impenetrable, was under attack. Together, he and Zara rushed to Spark's habitat, where a group of heavily armed mercenaries was attempting to override the dome's energy field. "You picked the wrong day to mess with this place," Harold growled, charging into the fray. With Zara providing covering fire, Harold used his ranger training to disable the attackers one by one. The mercenaries were relentless, but Harold's experience and Zara's precision turned the tide. Spark, sensing the danger, pressed itself against the dome's energy field, its scales glowing brighter with each passing second. "Harold!" Zara shouted. "I think it's about to dash." Before she could finish, Spark unleashed a pulse of gravitational energy that shattered the dome and sent the remaining mercenaries flying. The baby dragon spread its wings, its body alight with cosmic energy as it soared into the air. A galactic shift. In the aftermath, the mercenaries were rounded up by the sanctuary's security forces, and Krell's ship was forced into retreat. But the incident had far-reaching consequences. Spark's display of power was recorded by the sanctuary's surveillance systems, and within hours, the footage had leaked across the galaxy. Harold, Zara, and Kale watched the galactic news feeds in stunned silence as the galaxy reacted. Spark's abilities were now a matter of public knowledge, and factions from every corner of the universe were calling for its control. Some hailed Spark as a miracle, while others feared it as a potential weapon of mass destruction. Kale turned to Harold. "This changes everything. Spark can't stay here, not anymore." Harold nodded. "Then we find another way. Somewhere it can live free." Kale hesitated, then handed Harold a data chip. "There's a planet Orion 7. It's uninhabited, but it's rich in resources and completely off the grid. If anyone can keep Spark safe, it's you." Zara looked at Harold. "Are you sure about this? Leaving the sanctuary means you'll be on your own." Harold smiled faintly. "I've been on my own before. But this time, I've got Spark. A new beginning." The next morning, Harold and Zara prepared the green light for departure. Spark perched on Harold's shoulder, chirping excitedly as if it understood the journey ahead. Kale and the sanctuary staff watched as the ship lifted off, disappearing into the stars. For Harold, the mission was clear: protect Spark, no matter the cost. As they left Elisera behind, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but Spark was more than a creature of power. It was a symbol of resilience, of wonder, and of the potential for change. Harold didn't know what lay ahead, but he was ready to face it because, together, he and Spark could take on the universe. And maybe, just maybe, they could make it a better place.